I've always loved the Transformers movies, but they are a guilty pleasure. The idea of transforming robots, the wonderful CGI, the epic action scenes, and the amazing score are all phenomenal, but I can tell there's something off about the writing. I just never knew what it was, because people who hate on it don't have the writing chops to explain the issues properly. So in this video, I will be using several screenwriting books and strategies to break down what the technical problems in the first movie are. Robert McKee says that a story can be divided into a central plot and multiple subplots. The central plot is about Sam and the Autobots, and then there are a couple subplots. There's a romantic subplot with Mikaela, the soldier subplot with William Lennox, and the analyst subplot with Maggie Madsen. The central plot is what's most important. The first problem with the central plot is how late the inciting incident happens. McKee says that Act 1 should consume 25% of the story. In Michael Arndt's 3-act structure, he agrees with that and says the inciting incident should happen at the 10% mark. In Blake Snyder's beat sheet, he also says it should happen at the 10% mark. The inciting incident starts the main character's journey. One is the central plot's inciting incident in Transformers. It would either be when Bumblebee fights Barricade or when the Autobots arrive, because up until then, Sam was passive and reactive. He didn't have a journey. After the Autobots arrive, his first mission is to look for the glasses. The Barricade fight happens at 51 minutes, and the Autobots arrive at 59. That's the 38% and 43% mark, since the movie is 135 minutes total. It's supposed to be at the 10% mark. The romantic subplot has its incident at the 20% mark when Sam meets Mikaela at the party. The soldier subplot has its incident at the 4% mark when a Decepticon first attacks Qatar. The analyst subplot has its incident at the 11% mark when the Secretary of Defense gathers the analysts for help. All of these subplots have their incidents at somewhat acceptable times. It looks like the writers thought that as long as the subplots had their incidents early, they could delay the central plot's incident, but that's not how it works. In McKee's diagram for subplots, the earliest a subplot's inciting incident can happen is at the central plot's inciting incident. In Michael Arndt's diagram, the subplot, which he calls problem B, happens after problem A has been established, which is the problem of the central plot. In Blake Snyder's beat sheet, the B story happens on page 30 out of 110. Meanwhile, the inciting incident, or catalyst as he calls it, happens on page 12. A subplot's inciting incident isn't supposed to happen before the central plots, and doing it that way isn't a good excuse for why the central plot's inciting incident happens so late. Because it is so late in Transformers, the midpoint, where Bumblebee and Sam are captured, also happens late. It happens at the 65% mark. Arndt says the midpoint should be at the 50. Snyder also says 50. There are multiple solutions available. You could cut the subplots, but I feel like they offer a lot of depth and complexity to the plot. So I'd say rearrange the story so that Sam's central plot has its inciting incident before all the other subplots at the 10% mark. The only subplot I could let slide for happening earlier is the romance subplot, because Mikaela needs to be there in the Barricade fight. A counter-argument to this is one of McKee's quotes about subplots. When the central plot's inciting incident must be delayed, a setup subplot may be needed to open the storytelling. These subplots are meant to fill the void left by the delayed incident. A setup subplot dramatizes the central plot's exposition so that it's absorbed in a fluid, indirect manner. My problem with this counter-argument is that the central incident didn't need to be delayed. The time of the Autobots' arrival doesn't affect the soldier subplot happening in Qatar or the analyst subplot happening in the Pentagon. The subplots also don't positively affect the exposition, like McKee said. Sticking with the central plot, Act 2 has a problem. Here's what happens in Act 2. Sam, Mikaela, and the Autobots look for the glasses, but are arrested by Sector 7, which is the midpoint. Sam's group, the analyst group, and the soldier group all meet up at the base for exposition, revealing that Megatron is frozen. Frenzy and the other Decepticons start attacking. Bumblebee and Megatron are freed, and Megatron escapes. When the Autobots hit the road, that is the start of Act 3. This is an action movie, yet there's no fighting in Act 2, probably because they put a lot of fighting in the other subplots before this point. Regardless of the subplots, there should have been a fight scene between giant robots here. In Blake Snyder's beat sheet, Act 2 should have a fun and game section before the midpoint. Snyder describes this part as the promise of the premise. It's the core of the movie's poster and the stuff that goes in the trailers. For Transformers, that is giant acrobatic robots fighting each other. Additionally, Robert McKee said, a story must not retreat to actions of lesser quality or magnitude, but move progressively forward to a final action beyond which the audience cannot imagine another. That means a story should grow in intensity and stakes, yet Act 2 of Transformers is the least intense. Due to the bad timing of the central plot's inciting incident, Act 2 is pretty boring. Act 1 should be the most boring act in any story. Once again, I believe that the core of the subplots should have been moved to Act 2, especially the soldier subplot. I also think that there should have been an Autobot fight before or after they look for the glasses. When I stop to think about it, the Autobots, who are the main combatants, only fight in Act 3, with the exception of Bumblebee. That shouldn't happen. Based on Snyder's beat sheet, the romantic subplot isn't done well. He says the B story is usually a love story and is supposed to happen on page 30 after the central inciting incident, but I already went over that. The new problem was what Snyder says the love story should do. He says that it's the story that carries the theme of the movie. After the all is lost moment in The Dark Knight of the Soul, Snyder starts Act 3. Here, the characters and conversations discussing the theme are supposed to provide the hero with a solution to win in the A story. The external A story and the internal B story are supposed to join at the start of Act 3 and give the hero all the tools he needs to win the war. Transformers doesn't do any of that. In my breakdown of the plot, there are only two important scenes in the love story. There's the first one where Sam hits on Mikaela and drives her home, and then there's the barricade fight, which ends with them cuddling in a car. Then in the resolution of the movie, they're making out. That's it. There's no theme or character arc. There's no synthesis that helps the hero in the end. The subplot doesn't provide any value to the story on a technical level. McKee has multiple uses for subplots. I already mentioned the delayed central incident. He also says that subplots may be used to contradict the theme of the central plot, thus enriching the film with irony. Subplots can also be used to resonate the theme of the central plot and enrich the film with variations of the theme. Finally, a subplot can complicate the central plot. Barely any of that happens in Transformers. All of the fighting the soldiers do has nothing to do with the Autobots until all the subplots converge after the midpoint. The analyst subplot has Frenzy and Barricade gathering info, which leads them to Sam, so that deserves credit. But then the romantic subplot does nothing for the central plot. Now, Mikaela, the soldiers, and the analysts all help in the final battle, which is cool and why I wouldn't remove any of them. But they didn't require the amount of screen time they got. Most of the analyst subplot was just exposition dumps, and most of the soldier subplot was just extra action scenes that didn't mean much. That's what makes the film feel very long and tiring. Either the subplots should have their screen time reduced, or they should have an impact on the theme. That brings me to my next section. There's no theme in this movie. There's no character arc in this movie. I don't care that the Autobots weren't developed much, or didn't have a lot of screen time. None of that would be a problem if Sam had a good character arc, which could also be tied to the theme. K.M. Weiland has a book all about writing character arcs, which teaches you how to write an arc, and then write a plot and theme around it, with the conclusion of the arc aligning with the theme. John Truby's Anatomy of Story also puts a heavy emphasis on character arcs and themes uniting. He says weakness times basic action equals change, and the hero's moral choice is the theme. McKee said, storytelling is the creative demonstration of the truth/theme. It is setting up a theme and then proving it. Theme is a major part of his book, and he has a section on character arcs, saying the finest writing not only reveals true character, but arcs or changes that inner nature. Art has philosophical stakes, the theme, as a major part of how he writes an ending. Snyder values themes so much that theme stated is one of the steps on his beat sheet. All of these screenwriters value themes and character arcs, yet Transformers has none. I thought that maybe Optimus and Megatron's brief argument on how they should interact with mankind was the theme, but that's only introduced in Act 3. The theme is supposed to be introduced in Act 1. If I really wanted to reach, I could say that Optimus's quote on how humans should choose for themselves is externalized in the climax when Sam goes against his orders and puts the cube in Megatron's chest, killing him and winning the battle, but that's really reaching. In conclusion, Transformers isn't a bad movie, it's just messy. With a few scene rearrangements and a few technical additions, it could easily rise from a guilty pleasure to certified cinema. The central plot's inciting incident happens too late. Act 2 is devoid of fights, the promise of the premise, and is lower in intensity than Act 1. The subplots don't offer that much value for how much screen time they take up, and there isn't a theme or character arc in this film. Transformers did a lot right. If these few problems were fixed, it'd probably be a masterpiece, because everything else about this movie is stunning. Read a screenwriting book.